Hello and welcome to episode 248 of the Paintalltheminis podcast. We put the show together so you can have something to listen to whilst you are sitting at your desk and painting your miniatures for any scale, genre or game. Our aim is to have a relaxed and genuine conversation with someone who's as involved in the hobby as you are from any level, top to bottom, because we've all got our own unique and individual stories. Sit at your hobby desk, paint your models, listen to the chat. We really do hope that you enjoy the content. This week I speak to Mark, a fellow hobby nerd and a general all-round good chap. We do the usual chat about his personal hobby history and his initial hobby steps, and we meander along and pick out any salient points along the way that we felt were important. I'm not going to spoil any of the chat here. It pretty much will unfold itself in front of you as you listen along. Thanks to Mark for coming onto the show. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I hope that you, the listener, also enjoy it too. We are speeding very quickly towards episode 250, and we wanted the present to you guys for the 250th episode to be the opportunity to come onto the show. So I've put some questions in the podcast description. And if you want to, you can record yourself answering some or all of those questions, and you can email it to me at paintalltheminis@gmail.com. I will edit them all together, and then you can hear yourself and other people like you on the 250th episode. Thanks so much to the people that have already recorded, and I really appreciate the awesomeness and the positivity that you brought towards it. But there's always space for more people, so if you want to record yourself answering those questions, feel free to do so. Email paintalltheminis@gmail.com, and I will put it together into whip it all together like some sort of hobby podcast meringue that we can bake and have some sort of pavlova affair together. But that's enough of the pre-ramble. Let's go.
Paint all the minis. Paint all the minis that you can. And when you paint your minis, listen to that podcast with Dan Adams, that is.
What is good? To Paintalltheminis, see them deployed on the table and hear the lamentations of neckbeards.
So hey, I am here with Skid. How's it going, Skid?
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's great. I thought you were going to go in there with my real name, Dan. You built this up in the intro. You said, "Are we going to go with your real name?" I said, "Yeah, go with my real name." And then you sideswiped me with that. I don't think anyone used to call me that, but
no.
Well, not to my face. But I'm worried now that maybe that was my nickname, and I've now just discovered this age 45, and I'm having PTSD for something I wasn't aware of.
Or people were just saying it in the background near you, and you just never twigged. So your name is
happening.
Yeah, your name is Mark. But Skid Mark doesn't need to be negative. Skid Mark, where I'm from in the UK, is a negative thing, but it could just be
pretty negative.
It could be just a rubber mark on a racetrack.
Yeah, that's true.
But everyone. Sorry, go ahead. Everyone from where I was from that was called Mark was called Skid, aka Skid Mark. But no, never come across that at all. No.
No, yeah, well, that was what they used to say around me. But actually, on that, what did they used to call the thing in which you might find those in your local area? I think that's kind of a hallmark. What was the name for that garment?
Kegs.
Yeah,
Kegs.
With a G.
Yeah, the end. Yeah, K-E-G.
Yeah, it was around near me as well. Whereas I think it's a lot of people. It's with two K's, isn't it? K-E-K-S.
Well, those are trousers. Kegs are trousers. Yeah, kegs are trousers.
Right.
Kegs are your underpants, your boxers or whatever. Eh? But let me guess where you're from. You sound like you're from the kind of Coventry below area, around the Coventry kind of that area. Would that be correct? Just south of Coventry?
No. No, I'm. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I'm pause for ages. I'm trying to work out.
Where am I from?
I was trying to remember what east and west. I was getting a bit confused. So yeah, no, it's northwest of Coventry, so middle of Staffordshire. I grew up around Lichfield, which is a very small city just north of Birmingham.
Lots of undead witches.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Lich Lord. Lich. What is a lich? A lich, is it like a frozen kind of preserved wizard or witch? Is that what a lich is?
Yeah, it is. I think Lichfield, in the context of the name, it's one of those towns that's got the sort of bit of legends around what the name means, and it might. I think it just may refer to somebody's field, and that's the name.
Right.
It's got kind of changed. But then there's this whole like Field of the Dead thing, and there's a hill where there was a Saxon battle, and is it related to that? And
Right.
it's called Borracop Hill, which is where our school was, and we had Borracop Hill as part of the school. So, yeah, I don't know for definite what the name actually stems from, but I think that it's one of those kind of romantic things to reimagine place names as being a little bit more
Jazzy.
more exciting than maybe they were.
Yeah, man. So is that somewhere where you've always lived, or is it somewhere where you moved to and from and back again, or what's the deal?
Yeah, well, I wasn't born there. I was born in Worcestershire, where my parents are from, and then my dad moved with work, and we moved up to Lichfield when I was, like a baby, really, so about a year old. And I've lived there up until sort of always, really. I don't live in Lichfield itself now, and I moved out 25 years ago, but I just live nearby. I live in a small village in the countryside to the north of there.
How do you find kind of village living in England? Is it something you enjoy?
Yeah, it's nice. I like access to the countryside, and I like the kind of environment. But village life comes with pros and cons. The cons being the kind of evil people. It's kind of just got a bit of a sort of sinister feel to it.
Yeah.
You generally accept it when you've lived here for, sort of when your family's been there for 200 or 300 years. There's a level of acceptance, but I think that if you're a newcomer who's kind of come,
Just 50 years in.
post-industrial revolution, you're kind of seen as a little bit strange. So it's just the nature of these small places. Where I live, it's a small village, but I think the population of it's actually roughly similar to what it was about 1,000 years ago, or 800 years ago or so. So it's it used to be a sort of more important place, and it's become smaller now. It's probably only about 500 people live here, so it's pretty small, really.
Nice.
But yeah, no, it's nice. On the whole, it's pretty good. But
Have you got a local?
Everyone. There's two pubs in the village, actually. One's more of a restaurant, the other one's more of a pub, but I'm not really a pub goer. I don't drink, but that's kind of one of the reasons. But also it's kind of, they're very much the kind of places where you're very welcome to go there if you've always gone there. So I don't know who were the first people who went, or how that worked, but yeah, they seem to be quite, not the restauranty one, that's different, but the pub is quite, it's welcoming in inverted commas.
Right, if your face fits, it's very welcoming. Nice. What about non-hobby hobbies? What sort of stuff do you do that isn't painting and playing miniature games?
I think my main hobby outside of miniatures is really just being out and about. I like walking, and kind of, so living in the countryside is great for that, and I just love kind of going about. I quite like doing things slowly and deliberately, and taking my time to do things like that. So walking, something I really appreciate. I always like the fact that it's sort of it's our most natural mode of transport as a species, and yet it's not often used for transport. A lot of people will use walking as a sort of leisure activity or a fitness activity, but I quite like using walking as a way of getting somewhere. So our local town is about 3 miles away. So if I need something from the shop, I'll try to see if I can just walk in and walk back, in an hour and a bit. And I quite like the fact that you get to do that, and it just feels kind of more connected, because you think, well, actually that is the sort of natural way to do things.
I like it. I like you
kind of attached to the idea of using a car, and
man. I'm with you.
You can't do things.
Yeah, I'm with you for sure. Like, I don't ever want a car again. I might if I have to, but I like walking. I used to walk to work. I used to walk to and from work, and it probably used to take me about half an hour each way. And what I really liked about it is that on the walk in, I'd be thinking about the day ahead, and it had helped me to organise my day. And then when I was walking home, that was my decompression, and that gave me the chance to think about the things that had gone up. And then when I went through the front door, it was all gone and dead and buried. And I just hated commuting in a car. Really didn't like it all. It wasn't relaxing in the slightest. So yeah, man, I'm with you. Like, and I walk everywhere or cycle everywhere. I don't really get any other modes of transport around the city. The underground trains sometimes. But yeah, man, that's cool. That's awesome.
Nice. I think it's interesting there, actually, the fact that you live in an urban environment allows you to walk, and the fact I live in a rural environment allows me to. But there's a lot of people who are sort of stuck in the middle who are so dependent upon a kind of car-based lifestyle, you know. And I know you've lived in America, and my sister's lived in America, and it's very much a driving culture, isn't it, where shops aren't organised in that kind of a way. So driving places is what you do.
Well, people would stop me, like we would walk to work in America, and people would stop. And they would be like, "Are you okay? Have you been robbed?" It's like, "No, I'm just walking to work, mate." Because no one does it. Like, there's not even sidewalks, not even paths in half the places. And they were really nice people. Like, they were saying, "Are you okay? Like, has someone stolen your car? Is that why you're walking down the side of the road?" It's like, "No, mate." And it's really hot and humid there, and it was really hot and humid here as well. So, like, sometimes, a lot of the time, we go out to restaurants and things like that, and we're like pretty sweaty, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, are you okay?" It's like, yeah. We just cycled here. It's fine. But I think I've added up, not for a while ago, but I added up, like, you know, a lot of people have taxis here because the taxis are quite cheap, but not if you use them every single day. And I added up one time just like how much money would save just in 1 year by just not getting taxis, and it was a crazy amount of money. And so I really like it. It's free fizz, man.
Cool.
It's like people spend a lot of money like going to the gym, and it's like, but I can just do it for free. So you do a lot of walking. So last kind of question before we move on to hobby related stuff. Have you got like any set footwear that you like to wear when you're cutting around the place?
I've got a pair of walking boots that I tend to wear in terms of like if I'm going for a longer walk, but no, not really. I'm just kind of a trainer's person, really. So nothing particularly fancy. I think I've seen those cool shoes that are like are they like based on like Maasai people, and they're kind of like the idea is it sort of rolls with your foot, and it's sort of more of a natural way of walking.
Yeah, I've got these keen shoes.
Something like that.
Yeah, I've got these keen shoes, KEEN, keen, and they're called WK400. I think they are, like walk WK400, and they're really cool, man. Yeah. And so I can rock 30,000 steps a day when I'm on holiday, because like when we go on holiday anywhere, basically I'm walking or I'm eating or I'm like sitting down and watching something. So our holidays consist of we're going to this restaurant or this place for breakfast, and then we're going to walk to this place, and then what's in between those two places that we can stop and look at. So man, nice. Like those Keen WK400s, I think they are, they're pretty cool and they're pretty comfortable, and like my feet are still fresh after like say 30 to 40,000 steps. But anyway, hobby stuff. We're here to talk about hobby stuff. So what do you enjoy in the hobby world right now? What do you paint? What do you play with? What are you tinkering around with on a weekly basis?
I'm really into a lot of things, actually, in terms of kind of, I like it as a hobby that facilitates taking my imagination wherever I want it to go. I sort of see it as a very much a toolkit. So I'm not somebody who particularly plays at the box type games, or games with kind of set miniature ranges or set approaches or tournament approaches, or goes to kind of clubs for pickup games. I'm much more interested in creating something myself, choosing miniatures that I like, putting together rules, homebrewing things, creating scenarios, thinking about how to tell interesting stories using miniatures and using rules.
Nice.
I very much like it as a form of kind of a codified form of the kind of imaginary toy play that you do when you're a child. So that's kind of what I enjoy most about it. I enjoy the flexibility. I enjoy finding things that can be something else and taking my own spin on something. So I've been getting back into playing Warhammer Fantasy Battle since, which I hadn't done since I was a kid in the early 90s, but playing older versions of it and just not worrying too much about specifically, this is that rule and that matters with this, but using it as a way of kind of creating the stories that I wanted to tell and collecting the models I want. So I've got a Wood Elf army that I'm painting up at the moment, and I've done lots of skirmish games and stuff in the past, and a lot of some historical things, but when I've done historical things I've mostly gone down the kind of imaginations route, sort of fictional histories and so forth. So I'm kind of doing a bit of everything at the moment. I know that I am a little scattergun with it. I know that I'm not massively sort of organised or disciplined. I paint quite a bit and play a decent amount, but I quite enjoy the organic nature of just thinking of something and doing it, rather than particularly being too structured. My job, I have a lot of structured things to do and priorities and competing priorities and so on. And I don't want the competing priorities of the hobby to have an analogue with that. I want them to be that there are lots of like more of an interesting buffet from which you can choose rather than a series of decisions that you have to make, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I spoke to a person a while ago who had a distribution, like a board game and tabletop game distribution company, and we were talking about what sort of games that they like to play, and we talked about worker placement games, and he was like, I hate playing worker placement games. And I was like, why? And he's like, because that's what my job is. This distribution company is a worker placement game, so he used to really enjoy playing games that were the exact opposite to that. So you kind of found pretty much the same, but in order to kind of play in that sandbox, you need a certain amount of experience and a certain amount of imagination and a certain amount of confidence to be able to kind of do your own thing instead of just following things that are prescribed to you. So how did you first start tinkering around with things? Were people doing the same thing and they showed you, or did you just kind of go off piste quite comfortably yourself?
So I think that probably where it came about. So just quickly rewinding back, I was, did the hobby a little bit when I was a kid, from that age, I don't know, 11 or something like that, till I was about 14, and then nothing at all. And it was about 2018, my oldest daughter would have been about 11, and for some reason, I can't remember what it was, we would have been playing with something and making up some rules with using Playmobil toys, using rules to kind of facilitate a game of some description in the summer holidays or something like that. And we came across Burrows and Badgers, free rules and the miniatures, and it just all kind of clicked back into place. But I liked the fact that what it offered, but because we didn't have the miniatures, and I just downloaded these free rules, and we got some chess pieces and glued them onto circles of cards to make the right bases and improvised some terrain, and kind of essentially played the game with a PDF we found and kind of fudging our way through it. So that incredibly organic, what have you got and how can you make it work method seemed to be sort of almost my jumping back in point.
Yeah. So
I didn't come back in at the point of here's a box game, I've bought it, let's learn the rules and follow it and do it the right way, in inverted commas, but the prescribed way. I actually came in with much more of what toolkit can I use to invent something and play with the kids. So I think that was kind of the route back in. So it probably always started in my kind of current sort of past 7 years phase of playing games was, okay, well, what can you do and how can you make things work and how can you use them to tell stories? That was kind of already locked into my mindset. That was why I was there. That's why I'd come back.
Yeah.
So I think that was sort of the genesis of it. And then, I mean, I'm quite a creative person. I enjoy creating things and writing or drawing or making art or whatever it might be, and creating stuff. And always the children have been very imaginative as well, so playing imaginative games with them was a kind of major part of their early years. So yeah, I think that it was just another way of unlocking that sort of facilitating play thing, which kind of ironically goes back to more of the origins of sort of modern wargaming in terms of how it would have been a book from the library and a set of toy soldiers from Airfix, and you'd sort of put the two things together and work out how to turn it into a game, rather than perhaps what I'd been exposed to, which was more the GW box, and you open it and you read the rules and do the stuff. So yeah, it's I've actually really enjoyed coming back into the sort of far more organic side of the hobby, and I know what you mean. It could seem overwhelming because fundamentally there's almost any choice is available to you at any point, but personally I really struggle with I think the way my mind works, I really struggle with sort of sequencing and prescribed things and codified things. It doesn't appeal to me, and I get stuck with that. Give me a form to fill in and I'll be baffled, but give me a blank piece of paper, I'm away. I like the open choices rather than the closed choices. So I think that's the way my brain works. So yeah, to me it was kind of like manna from heaven, knowing there was all these resources, miniatures, different rule sets out there that I'd at that point not been aware of, and kind of just putting it all together and joining communities and speaking with people, whether that's online communities or physical ones, has really opened up my eyes to the fact there's a lot more people doing this kind of gaming than I would have imagined, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You mentioned before we talk more around this. You mentioned that you kind of did the hobby kind of early teens. Were you seriously into it at that point, or was it more just like messing around, dabbling with it?
Yeah, so it would have been. So I know I would have got Hero Quest for Christmas in 1989. Primarily because it looked like a really good, fun board game. I always liked having board games for birthdays and Christmas, and that was the sort of zeitgeist at the time. And the cartoons that were on telly and the sort of it just looked great. So I could see why I wanted that. I wasn't. And then sort of naturally moved into secondary school, and a lot of people at that point were getting into Warhammer. People's older brothers generally were kind of playing 3rd edition Warhammer, and then the 4th edition box set came out when I was probably in year 7 or 8 at school, just starting secondary school. So it was very much at that point in time when GW were kind of kicking on and it was getting big. A lot of the lads in our year were well into it. It was really popular. So I got into it in that relatively peripheral way. Not peripheral, I was into it, but I was into it in the way that lots of people were. And had the High Elves that came with the box set, and bought a few more bits to go with that. Bought the Man of War set and a couple more ships, and had the 40k set. Never really played that, but it's kind of that was it really. And then 2 or 3 years of things sitting on the shelf. Painting was a bit overwhelming for me, to be honest. Wasn't great at it and struggled with that. So overall, it kind of just fizzled out naturally. Because it'd been such a big thing in like year 7 and 8, where loads and loads of the lads that got into it, and then only a few of them really stuck with it beyond about year 9 or so. I kind of just dropped out naturally along with the rest of people. Always still maintaining an interest in kind of fantasy and imaginative stuff and storytelling and so on, but not through that lens of game playing really.
And were you always aware of it in the background as you kind of became an adult and a dad, or did you completely just forget about it and didn't recognise it as a thing?
Yeah, no, I completely forgot about it, and probably was quite dismissive of it. Being honest, I probably thought it was a bit nerdy and a bit and a bit not my cup of tea. I didn't really keep up with it at all. Certainly the kind of the GW stuff. I really liked the look of it when I was into it, and then I think if I ever would have done anything like glanced in the window of a shop in the early 2000s and seen that kind of new, more grimdark look, and not the bright reds and the kind of hero-y type cartoonish look, that I would have gone, not interested. That wouldn't have been my vibe. So it still isn't. So there was nothing to hook me back in. Whether it was the novels or buying the magazines or just kind of looking in. It wasn't aimed. I wouldn't be a target audience for that product running at that time. So I never really kind of gave it another thought. It was simply having the kids and them enjoying stuff, and I struggled to actually realise what was the catalyst that enabled me to see the Burrows and Badger stuff, and I don't know. I think it was a blog by an author that I saw or something like that. It will have been someone else in a completely different creative space that I will have followed, and they went, "Oh, I really like these." I thought, "Oh, they're pretty cool." Were you looking for
a new hobby at that time, or did it come along completely unexpectedly?
I mean, possibly a little bit, because the children are a bit older, so I was starting to get a bit more time. So it's. I mean, I'm always amazed by how many people who are in the hobby have got quite young children, because my kids are relatively old now, sort of 19 and 15. So there's an element of being kind of a surprise that people have got the time when they've got young kids. But I probably was looking for something, and I think I was probably just spending sort of round about that time. It would have been when I was kind of really coming off social media and really kind of purging it, because I think when the social media stuff hit, and I was quite interested by it around like 2004, 2005, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. I work in marketing, and it was like, oh, this is the new thing. And I kind of got into it for 10 years and then just thought, oh Christ, I hate this, and deleted everything really. And I think that because if you'd said to me what was my hobby when the kids were smaller, I would have said, I haven't really got one. It's because I was just pissing my time up the wall, not because I didn't have a hobby. So so that doom scrolling thing was just it would have been a thing for me. So yeah, I've kind of really found that, and I like the fact that you can take something tangible, make something, and do stuff. We were doing the house up a lot as well here before that, so there was always a lot of DIY stuff to be done, which, you know, is not the same as doing the hobby, but it uses some of the same skills, and it's practical, and you make something. So there's an element of that kind of physical creation thing that is important to me, and there's a way of carrying that on.
So let's pick the kind of current hobby chat back up if we can. So you mentioned, like, you know, Playmobil figures and chess figures and just make and do. So how did that progress within the family? Did you then start buying actual miniatures and painting actual miniatures within the family with your daughters?
Yeah, so we bought some Boris and Badgers figures because the girls were like, "Oh, these are pretty cool. Can we have some of these to play the game?" And so I got some and painted them and bought one of those basic army painter sets where you get, like, you know, the 8 colours or whatever it might be in a brush. And I was like, do you know what? This isn't too bad. I think I hadn't really used particularly good acrylic paints in the past. I'd used, you know, some second-hand citadels that were probably dried out a bit, and some enamels and stuff, and I'd had a bit of a bad time of it. Plus, you know, being 11 and not very good at things like that, you know, I just didn't really have the time or patience. So, and I managed to get some, what I thought were quite good results with the Boris and Badger stuff, and actually they still hold up quite well. I painted them 7 years ago, so the first things I did, but I think they look nice. And so I kind of bought them for that game with maybe more of a closed mindset of, like, oh, that's the game. And then they published the hardback set of rules at that time, and I bought those. So yeah, that was kind of what we were getting into, and made a lot of homemade scenery, just out of junk and recycling and stuff to play on the dining room table. So that was kind of the origin of it all. And then I kind of got distracted. Oh, I like this over there, and I saw stuff on TV, the Crooked Dice game, and I got some stuff for that. And then I got some English Civil War things, and then I got some dwarfs and some goblins, the EM4 ones, the very cheap ones. Got Dragon Rampant, and so it just kind of escalated, and you know, I must have, I don't know, 1,500 miniatures painted, I would have thought by now. So you know, I've kind of rattled on quite fast and got some big stuff and quite a lot of things, but always as efficiently and cheaply as possible. You know, I don't like to spend a lot of money on figures because it feels like an indulgence. So I try and to spend moderately, but you know, there's very expensive things you can buy in the hobby, and there's some very cheap things. Like my Wood Elf army I'm doing now, it's all metal pretty much, and the Wood Elves are about 90p each from Battlezone old Grenadier models that are still made. You know, for a metal figure you can get for under £1. So it's not necessarily the kind of money that people might think. So
no,
yeah,
that's true.
I've been just kind of really just trying to explore and push what do I fancy and what would I like to get. I have reached a bit of a saturation point in terms of storage though, because where I've got all my stuff is on a kind of loft space in our house that is now literally like the last box fits in there now. And I'm kind of taking that as a really nice jumping off point to go, right, well, I'm going to paint the remainder of what I've got that I'll probably get done by Christmas, I would have thought-ish, and then just play more games, get out there and do more playing. And that's certainly what I've been doing the last couple of years, playing a lot more. Whereas up till then, more playing at home with kids, but more recently kind of getting out there, meeting people through the different communities that I'm members of, and going to events and being more participatory, and I've really enjoyed that.
How did that start then? What were your first steps in growing outside of the family group for social interaction, for buying things, for playing new games, and maybe playing with other people? Like, how did you approach that?
Yeah, well, my initial thought was to kind of look around and see what local game clubs are available to me, and I found a couple that were relatively nearby, one of which didn't seem to really offer what I was interested in. It was kind of very much like a kind of competitive 40k led thing. Another one which was quite historical and didn't appear to have really any kind of, although I think they may have a bit more now, not really any kind of fantasy and sci-fi type stuff, because even if I would play a historical game, I'd want to do it with a kind of lighter touch, less rigorous historical perspective, and more of a kind of just playing a fun game kind of thing. And then the third one that looked quite good, but unfortunately the timings of when they're on was it's just incompatible really with, it was like Sunday nights and stuff. It was just, it's not easy, and that's not going to work. So yeah, and I was kind of a little disheartened at first. I was like, oh, okay, there's not really anything. But I went along to the PATM show, which is a big, predominantly historical, but they have a lot of fantasy and sci-fi stuff there, show a couple of years ago, I think, for the first time. Went to that, met some people, kind of just did that thing where you just go, I'm going to do it. I'm relatively introverted, as most people probably are in the hobby. I've got a job that requires me to be sort of social and get out there and talk to people, run events, and be kind of there. So I can pull that veneer on and cope with a social situation once they believe me. So I kind of went to that and was like, oh, let's give it a go. Really found it very welcoming and warm. And a part of me thought it might have been a bit exclusive, and it wasn't. It was very inclusive, and that kind of gave me a bit more momentum to then start asking some questions in the. So kind of circling back a bit, the Bedroom Battlefields podcast, when that first sort of launched, I sort of found about it somehow, I don't know how, probably through Matthew's website, and then started listening to that, and then he set up the Discord, and I kind of got in really early on that, and was an active participation, but in a remote way, behind a screen. It's not the same as a physical social interaction, but I decided to kind of use that as a platform to try and say, let's start talking. So I spoke to Matthew and said, can we start doing some regular kind of, we do these quarterly sort of virtual pub type sessions, which we call the Royal Orc. So we kind of invite people, anyone can join and do some fun and games and mess about, and it's always good fun. And from that was then a sort of natural conversation led into like doing games days, and Jason, a good friend of mine, who's for that community, is now a good friend of mine. We didn't know each other previously. He and I started talking about ways that we could run big games, because he's got this enormous setup and can do stuff, and he was looking for people who wanted to come and play. So we've run some big games days, some near me, some down near Jason. We did one a couple of weeks ago, and so really kind of try and get out there and do stuff, go to things. Went to Bring Out Your Lead last year and going again this year, and just trying to kind of say, okay, where's the fun to be had, and how do I get there, and how do I push myself out of my comfort zone and into those social interactions and into those opportunities to meet people and play. And I think the online community as a gateway to a real life community has been for me the perfect kind of step. I think that's been the right way, and I think it's been a really useful way of finding and curating that community of like-minded people, because you know that you've all singing from the same hymn sheet when it comes to wanting to play a game in a certain way. And as a result, unsurprisingly, when you get to meet people in real life, the people we've met, like Luke and Ed and Tim, and the people who've come down, and the people who are at Jason's last event, there's Ben and Richard and some other people that Jason knows, are all coming to these events. You're like, yeah, these great guys, and really get on well with them. We've all come from different perspectives, different walks of life, but united by a common goal, if you like. And we're very diverse in our approaches, but very united in our in what we want to get out of it.
I think that's the best of social media, or the best of the internet age, isn't it? Where I kind of liken it to my own life, that I as a young adult, I never had a long-lasting romantic relationship that started on a night out, like a nightclub or a pub. The really great romantic relationships that I've been part of when I've taken time to get to know people, the likes, the dislikes, the way that they approach their life. That's how I found my relationships. And it's kind of similar, I find, in gaming. What you're talking about here is that instead of just going down to the local pub, instead of just going down to the local gaming club and playing, you're taking a little bit more time, you're looking around a little bit more, and you're finding the people that you want to connect with, instead of just connecting with the people that are just within the local vicinity, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think for me, I've kind of I'm very much it's probably a thing that kind of comes with age and so on, but I'm very much looking at my life with this perspective of fewer things in greater depth. and wanting to explore that being a way of making things more meaningful and impactful. That's certainly echoed in that. I do understand absolutely why people want to go to a club and get a pickup game every week, because they enjoy the game for the game's sake. But I would say I don't probably enjoy the game for the game's sake. Particularly, I enjoy the game for the social narrative event, if you like. So I'm probably less of a gamer and more of somebody who wants to have a facilitated social experience. I'm not particularly keen on a kind of, if you have to go to a work night out and you just sit next to someone and there's like a chance to chat, you're like, that means there's just a chance for it to be deathly silent. Whereas when the food comes, at least you can just talk about whether the food's nice for it. So I think that the sort of facilitated social interactions is probably a space in which I kind of thrive, and I feel better doing that than something that's incredibly exposing and open.
I think it's really good when you play a game with somebody as like an icebreaker, because you focus on the game and it gives you something to interact with, and the game is the shared experience. Like again, I'm the same. Whenever I go to parties, it's kind of like I find it really awkward to get into a conversation with somebody, because I don't really want to talk about what I do. I don't really talk about, like, I don't want to seem like I'm coming across as bragging or anything in that. And then equally, I just don't really want to talk about that. I want to find something that's interesting to talk about. And I find that when I'm meeting people the first time I'm playing a game, you can kind of do a little bit of chit chat, but the game is the focus, and that's cool. So you never really thought about the competitive, Warhammer player and tournaments? That never fluttered its eyelids at you?
No, not in the least. Actually, I'm not actually. I'm not really interested in kind of competitive play in general, really. I think that it's just something that's not really appealed to me. I think if you've got more of a sports background, you might have that sort of DNA really a bit more entrenched. But it's not something that massively kind of appeals to me. I'm not a video gamer. I just don't think of. I think of games as being more like play and less like sport.
I get it completely. It's like if you think about Monopoly or Risk.
Different ways of looking at these.
No, there is. And if you think about Monopoly and Risk, you don't have like all day tournaments of Monopoly, right? And for me, I don't see. And like I said, if people enjoy competitive games and going to tournaments, and lots of people do, and that's great. But I've never been bitten by that bug myself. The same thing. It's like the idea of playing like 4 games in one day doesn't really appeal to me so much. And if I am looking for a competitive experience, I don't think it'd be a tabletop game. I think it'd be something else that lends itself more to that competitive field. Does that kind of make sense? That's much my opinion, but I don't know.
I understand that. I think it matters. I think what you're looking for out of the day really matters. Like, if somebody was to describe a full day of gaming to me, tabletop gaming, I would imagine that to be, like things that we've done where you're playing a big game for 8 hours rather than you're playing 4 games over 8 hours. I think that it and you're going to win at the end of it. It's kind of it's something quite significantly different. There was a bit of a chat the other day where someone was describing, this was on the Bedroom Battlefields Discord, someone was describing how modern 40k and Age of Sigmar and so forth tends to work in a way where there's a huge amount of information that you can learn about this, about what different special rules there are and how they intermesh and how you can create synergies and so forth, in a similar way to perhaps a card game or something like that. And that, you start getting into the territory thinking, I wonder whether or not, the miniatures are even particularly important. Or whether or not it's kind of a game of knowledge where, certainly at school, at school I'm very bad at exams and very bad at remembering things. And that feels to me like the idea of a game you can kind of revise your way to be good at. It doesn't start any fires under me whatsoever. It leaves me pretty cold. I like the idea of a game where the craziness and the chaos and the fun of it tells a story, and the decision making is you're kind of very you're making decisions. It's more of a role-playing style. So, I've got my wood elves. So how would they behave? What would they want to do? And what would happen? What would tell the better story? I mean, that's certainly what happened 2 weeks ago when we had our big Warhammer game. We Jason and I were talking about it the other day and saying, I think that what we realised had happened is it wasn't the best player who won; it was the best story that won. And, and I think that I think that it was played with a sort of true spirit of. So Ed, who was playing the Skaven team, he did very Skaven-y things, and fun things happened as a result. And that was intrinsically very entertaining for everyone. Whereas if he'd have played it as a game, we probably would have had a colder experience. So for me, I think that competitive gameplay type format that is probably more informed by video games and collectible card games seems quite distant from the thing that I'm interested in. But fortunately, there seem a huge amount of people who are actually interested in what I like. Well, certainly enough people. Certainly enough. And I think that's great.
Nice. And so how often do you play? Do you play on a weekly basis? Is it a monthly basis? Is it just as and when you can find time?
Yeah, it's fairly as and when, actually. One thing that I have had a bit of success with doing, as well as doing some games over Discord, but where you point your camera at the table. So a friend of mine, David, who lives in Chicago, who I met through the Discord, he and I have played a few times, and that works really well. So I think that's a way to play. I know you can do sort of tabletop simulator type stuff, but probably not really something I'm massively keen on myself, because it's not really a kind of I don't really necessarily think about the sort of video gamey element of it being something that appeals to me massively. But so that happens. Play a bit sometimes, at home if I can. Certainly do some solo games as well, because I kind of enjoy doing that. I find like that actually quite fun. I enjoy the whole aspect of writing little lists and thinking about stories, and I find the hobbies that would be very complete insofar as if you're not playing, you can still be having a huge amount of fun. And when people say, "Oh, I don't play, I only paint," sometimes people go, "Oh, poor you, that's a bit of a shame." And it's like, well, those people are potentially in a position where they're having a great time. So it's probably reasonable that we don't have expectations that somebody should be doing things in proportions that are similar to you, as long as you're doing something that you're enjoying, and then that's kind of positive. But I probably would like to play a little more, but at the same time, because of the nature of the game that we did a couple of weeks ago, Jason lives well over 100 miles away from me, so it's not like the kind of thing you're going to do every weekend. It's just not going to happen, so that's fine. And actually, it makes you cherish the moments and the longer time to be able to play, and it creates a more of a heartbeat, a rhythm throughout the year, where you're kind of able to look forward to these moments and these little celebrations where you get to come together and do it. It takes away the transactional quality and turns it into something a little bit more magical if you really are pinning a lot more onto that game, Dave.
I think you're right. I think you mentioned something a little bit ago that really hit the nail on the head for me, is that there's so many different entry points to the hobby, and we can all have a relationship with it that's drastically different from other people, and all of those are okay. If you only paint, if you only read your rule books, if you only play once a year, these things don't really matter. It's not like as if it's a thing that has to be done at a certain time. Like, you think about, like, if your hobby is watching certain TV shows, it's a little bit different now with streaming, but if you wanted to watch a certain TV show, it had to be at like 8 p.m. on a Wednesday night, or if you're a football fan, you have to go and watch the game at this time, and those things are great. I'm not saying they're not, but one thing I do like about the hobby is that it's so accessible for so many people on so many different levels, and you can have a great amount of fun, but in a very, very different way. I really do like that, and I can't think of too many hobbies that are that open to being interpreted and utilized by so many different people.
No, I think it's the nested quality of the sort of hobbies within the hobbies that makes it quite appealing, really. I think it's also it's not necessarily as inaccessible as people might expect it to be, because some of the entry points or the gateways that people are exposed to about it might be, if we come back to that kind of collectible card game style synergies gameplay, okay, that could be off-putting, a bit difficult. It might be pricing, Games Workshop models quite expensive. So, unfortunately, sort of all roads slightly lead back to GW here, and they don't always leave you feeling great, because there are there's elements of kind of going, oh, okay, well, I feel like that could be a bit of a dead end for someone. That could be a bit of an off-putter for somebody. But actually, if you look at the broader sense of what you can do with it, given the hobby could simply be looking at models that you like and having a think about buying them, and just enjoying them, or going to a show and looking at some stuff that's on the table. That could be a valid way of participating in the hobby. It doesn't have to be all or nothing by any means. There's so many degrees of entry and so many degrees of participation. I think that's a really important thing to recognise for anybody saying, I can't do this, I can't do that. We're not dealing in binaries here. You can think about the degree to which you wish to get involved in something, and the sky's the limit, but also there's very little. I don't think there's as much barrier to entry as perhaps is discussed or perceived.
Yeah, and you can easily ring fence it so it's a standalone entity. If you think about a gym membership or like streaming that we just mentioned there, or other things, sometimes you're beholden to like a monthly fee or like a constant purchase of things. Whereas you mentioned you bought the Burrows and Badges rule set. And that's it. You could just keep that and play that, and there might be a different edition, and there might be different things that are added. But generally speaking, I love Frostgrave because it's just a book, and then if I want to play Frostgrave, I just use the book, and I really like that. And that's especially with inflation and how everything's getting a lot more expensive. I just find it, you purchase it, and then you can use it as many times as you want to, and as long as you don't lose it or drop it in a puddle or anything like that, you're pretty good to go. But let's kind of flip the conversation to painting if we can. So how serious would you say that you take your painting?
I would say I value it, and I'd say that I enjoy it, and I'd say that I do it to a standard where I feel satisfied with it, but I would definitely feel like it was of a standard that was for my enjoyment and to enable me to play games that I think look good, rather than sharing images and entering competitions and trying to kind of... I'm not in a position where I'm seeing it as something that I am looking for mastery in. I am in a position where for example, if you take a kind of comparison of cooking, I enjoy cooking, I enjoy thinking about recipes, I enjoy eating good food, but fundamentally it's the sitting down and having the meal that leads me to want to cook each night. And that's kind of similar with the painting. I'm not in a position where I'm kind of, I'm going to buy, some scallops and try and cook them just to see whether I can get it right. I'm not bothered about eating them, which is kind of what happens if you get to the sort of top end of the mastery model, where you are doing things for the sake of becoming better, and it's the progress that is your measure rather than the purpose. Whereas I'd say no, on this I'm kind of doing it quite purpose-led, and I really enjoy it. I think that I'm doing it to a standard that I'm happy with, and sometimes when I look at things and think, I could do better, I need to sort of take a step back and say, I certainly do very much recognise the fact that this hobby is it's a child's hobby which is being participated in by a man to fulfil a kind of level of inner peace.
Is that how you see it? You just see it? Do you still see it as a child? Is it a child thing? Is it what you'd say?
No, I don't, because I don't think no, I'm being facetious, because really I don't actually think that there is such a thing as a child thing. Or Anyway. But I think I can't remember who the quote is from, but it's the we don't get old because we don't stop playing because we get old. We get old because we stop playing. Somebody. Anyway, that's the kind of. So I think it's a myth to say, that's what kids do. But I am actually doing it. I like the sort of almost regression of, this is fun, this is trivial. I enjoy the trivial nature of it. I enjoy the fact that I am doing something that does not need to be done, that is being done purely for pleasure. I think that's kind of where, if you think about, whether it's travel, tourism, whether it's watching a film or watching a sunset, or whatever it might be, those things kind of have a huge intrinsic value, and yet they have a very little demonstrable worth if you're measuring them in terms of things you have to do in life. And for me, this fits into that category. So I think that the painting level that I'm doing to is I'm looking at it partly through a lens of the 12-year-old me who has got those old second-hand paints and the Humbrolls, thinking, well, these are miles better, and that makes me really happy. And I love just to see the array of colour and the 3D landscape. I think that's the most important part of hobby for me. Put the terrain, put the models together, create a spectacle, create a visual environment. This really great.
There's two things that I want to reinforce there. The first thing is like what you're talking about, how I didn't do the hobby as a kid, but when I buy a new paintbrush, or when I buy some new paints, or when I put a unit or two on the table, I won't say I'm doing that for like the 14-year-old me, but it makes the 14-year-old me really happy, because I think those are the things that I really wanted or needed, but I wasn't able to do. I'm not criticizing my family or anything like that, but it's like, just as an adult, being able to do those things that you really wanted to do as a kid. And don't get me wrong, I've not got an infinite budget or anything like that, but if the 14-year-old me was like, I'd really want a new paintbrush to do that unit, or that red would be really good on those shields or whatever, it's just like, don't worry, I got you back, I got it, I do it. And there is a certain amount, I don't know what that would call, like maybe a holding environment for the me from the past, where I'm creating this holding environment from me of the past, where I'm like, but that me from the past is me. So I feel like it's kind of like, is it self-help? Is it looking after myself? Is it treating myself nice by doing the hobby? I think there's something in there for sure, definitely, where it's like I'm treating myself right, I'm treating myself well, and I'm doing things that I particularly enjoy. And then the second thing you mentioned there about cooking, I'm the same. I really enjoy cooking. I really enjoy making meals and things like that. But it's not. I obviously want it to make it really nice, but I want to make it really nice for other people. And when we invite people around to our house to have a meal, it's not just the quality of the meal that I'm interested in per se. It's a level of care that one person can go to for another to try and create a positive experience. And that seems to be the same mentality that you've got you're playing too. Is that you want to have these fun and interesting narrative games that people enjoy, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why I think that for me, taking things and putting on a game and doing that relatively brave thing of saying, okay, well, I could be the host, I could do that, I feel like that is really rich and rewarding, because what it does is other people come and you can see them enjoying themselves because of something you bothered to do.
You're right, exactly right.
Yeah, when the kids were little, we kind of used to sort of sometimes have birthday parties for them, and sometimes we want to do something very ordinary or whatever, but other times it'd be like, just want to go to the park and just play games. And so I'd make things and come up with games and do little crazy things, like so little puzzles and games and stuff like that they could engage with, that were invented and were different and that people hadn't done before, and it's like there's something really like hugely valuable in people go, that was a really good party, it was really original, it was really different. And I think that kind of being able to create an experience for people and host an experience where things are different and things are invigorating and make them think, it doesn't have to be like that, it doesn't have to just come out of the box and be played straight. There's something really quite exciting about that. I mean, it's probably because I'm kind of, I do like creating things. I kind of, that would be my thing, is I like to say that wasn't there and now it is. And creating these little miniature worlds is definitely very satisfying, and it feels like it I think you're right to say about that kind of idea of self-care. I think it does. I think you're honouring something that's kind of deeply innate in us as human beings, to want to create and want to tell stories. And maybe the modern world tends to suppress that and turn us more into consumers than creators.
Yeah, for sure.
You don't make a lot of money being a creator. I spend less money being creative than I would if I was consuming, to be honest.
Yeah, I kind of, something that jumped to mind when you're talking there about creating something. It made me think about the gentrification of certain cities and areas within cities. So generally, what happens in a poor area of a city or a town is that loads of creative people go there because it's cheap and no one wants to be there, and they do lots of fun and interesting stuff stuff just to do it because they want to, just to do it because it feels good. And then a few people get into it and they think that's great, and then they move in, and then the house prices go up, and then Starbucks moves in, and before you know it, the people that have created this fun and interesting environment have to leave because they can no longer afford to be there anymore. And if you link that to kind of consumerism, it's kind of the same. It's like someone comes up with a great idea and it's fun and interesting and engaging, and then maybe they codify that into a rule book, and that's great, but then there's a mini line comes out for it, and then there's a competitive tournament that starts, and then there's a worldwide take up, and maybe the reason that it existed and the reason why it was so good slowly and steadily starts to be eroded. I don't know.
No, I think you're right. Well, if necessity is the mother of invention, then surplus is definitely, the opposite, isn't it? Because by creating an environment where you're providing everything and everything is there to be purchased and to follow and rules to be followed, then in some ways it's kind of like a false utopia. Look at all this bounteous supply, but people then won't progress and won't make new things. So I certainly do feel like one of the things that's important to bear in mind with that is kind of that, okay, well, I'm not locked into this, I don't have to spend this money, but it does, that's not going to restrict my fun. My fun is up to me, that's on me.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Yeah, it's not something that you can buy in a box and unpack. But as we kind of roll around to our time is rattling by. You mentioned a few games. You've mentioned a few kind of areas that you're interested in. So what would you say would be your favourite game right now? And what sort of things as you look towards Christmas and beyond? Because you mentioned like painting up until Christmas and then playing more. What sort of games do you have your eyes on, and what sort of games interest you?
Yeah, so I in terms of games, I suppose I probably wouldn't really define it massively in terms of what I'm playing as a kind of game per se. It's more kind of I don't really mind particularly which rules we use. I'm interested in big fantasy games. That's kind of my thing, I think, more than anything else. I like big battle games. I like to see a lot of figures on the table. I like that kind of thing. I like that feel, because that's certainly harks me back to what I was most captured by when I saw visually when I was younger. Oh, this looks fantastic. I like small scale stuff as well, really, in terms of skirmish things, but that's my thing. I'd say fantasy is my favourite. I kind of dabbled with a little bit of sci-fi stuff, but it's not really hugely interesting to me massively. And the historical stuff that I've got is very sort of 19th century imagination stuff, which I'm kind of enjoying doing a bit of solo campaigning with as well. I like the idea of campaigns and bringing ongoing narratives and stories together, so more of that kind of stuff, really. So whether it's using Warhammer or whether it's using, I've got a new Midgard set that's got a great set of rules. I need to get that on the table, and I like the Dragon Rampant and those Rampant games. They're great for sort of smaller level things. So I'm quite flexible about what the rules are, and I think of the game as being more like saying, we're going to organise a birthday party. People don't say to you, okay, so what flavour crisps are you going to have first? Do you see what I mean? We'll come to that and we'll work that out, but we don't need to know that now. It's more like, well, what do I want the birthday party to feel like? What do I want the experience to be? Yeah. And I think that the rules are just one of the elements that get you there. So more of that, more of using what I've got. I think I've probably played with each model that I own, that I have painted, and I've probably played a game with each of them, but maybe not all of them all the time, or maybe not enough. So it's a case of getting more of the stuff on the table. I am keen on exploring if there are people in the local area as well who are looking to play games, and on a sort of, not so much the club game thing as we've discussed, but more the kind of the quick 2-hour game, because that's I haven't really been getting a lot of that kind of gaming, and there is real merit in that. For as much as I enjoy the big monster games, there's real merit in the kind of quick game of something as well. So playing more and being quite open-minded about what that is, and if someone else is running something, being a bit more keen to go, I could go along for that, see what's going on. So that's kind of my take on it right now. So it doesn't really directly answer your question in terms of which games, but it's more what things would I.
No, I get it. It totally makes sense, man. And it sounds like you've got a real mix of things that you enjoy. What is it about the fantasy setting? Not just, you mentioned that you like the fantasy setting because that kind of what you maybe first saw.
Yeah.
But are you watching movies? Are you reading books in the fantasy genre also?
Not films really. I used to like films when I was a kid, and we've got a telly, but I don't think I've watched anything on TV since about 2010. So I just don't really occupy that space, and just don't really look to there for things. I read quite a lot. In terms of this kind of fantasy I read, I do still really like a lot of the older stuff, the Michael Moorcock books. I'm still reading a lot of those, and I also like reading a lot of sort of folklore and non-fiction stuff, or short stories that are older things. I'm kind of very interested in like British folklore and British legend and so on. That's something I'm quite keen on. So I think the fantasy thing I find really resonant is I like the fact that it's rooted in partly a sort of history, because I've always enjoyed history, but also in a kind of a romanticized, fantastical version of history. Because whenever I think back to, imagine if you have a time machine, where would you want to go? The true answer is you probably wouldn't want to go to many places or many times. It would have been pretty grim. And I think the reality of the picture you have in your mind about going somewhere back in the past is quite a romantic, fantastical one. So yeah, for me, I think that's why I enjoy the fantasy stories, because and in a very loose way, really. I'm not really particularly, I don't keep up with modern fantasy books or anything and so on, but I like kind of old classic literature mainly, and which brings in those elements, and I like more the sort of folkloric things, I think. So that's sort of the world I like. Plus my kids have grown up reading a lot of children's fantasy books, whether that's Diana Wynne Jones or Alan Garner and Ursula Le Guin and those authors, and those books still really mean a lot to me. I might have read them when I was a child, and I like those places. I like the fact that they existed in a time before things were kind of codified and this is how fantasy works. I like fantasy when it was kind of playing at the edges and very countercultural.
Yeah, people talk about things being like algorithmic, right? And it's like you follow these certain things and then it'll be popular. And like I kind of quite like when things were too strict, where people were just doing stuff, and there was nothing that had been before, so there were no rules to follow, because this was new, this was different, this was it was a different direction to things that had gone before, and I struggle with some modern fantasy books because it just seems, I read this a lot before, this seems to be like a kind of a pinch of this and a dash of that, and it'll be just as popular as this one that was around like 5 years ago. And I see books sometimes, and I think there's a strap line that says like TikTok made me buy it, and I'm just like, no, I'm just simply not going to read that book anymore, because you're basing
it's got about 3 things wrong with it, hasn't it?
Yeah, exactly right. But yeah, I'm with you on the fantasy tropes, man. I kind of like I love fantasy for similar reasons. It's like there's a certain unwritten law and nature to things. It's like it's charming, and even when you're reading old fairy tales that Hansel and Gretel, or certain ones, Hans Christian Andersen stories that are not particularly pleasant in some ways, there's a certain balance to them, which I think is built on the world that we'd like to be part of, even if that is a bit grim at times, even if that is a bit a certain way. It kind of, I don't know, it's very attractive, the fantasy novels, man. It's pretty cool. I think just the idea of the unknown as well in fantasy, the fact that there's monsters and fairies and different things like that. I think that's charming in its own way too.
I think we live in a world as well where the narrative is usually intended to push you to one end of the spectrum or the other. To divide is the best way of kind of getting your message across, it seems, which is a sad thing. So a lot of people see the world in binary terms, and they see the world through a sort of very scientific lens. And I'm not a religious person, but I have kind of enormous respect for people who are able to focus on the greys and think less about the blacks and whites. And I think that I like the enjoyment of being able to say, I like that because I don't know the answer. Rather than that bothers me because it's unknown. And I think fantasy allows you to occupy that space where not knowing things is what it's all about. And things not being. You occasionally hear about fantasy authors nowadays kind of thinking about sort of world building and internal logic within the world. I think, it's a bit of a shame really, because if you were to watch He-Man, I don't think that's a very well thought out world. But it's fun.
Yeah. But it leaves you places to think about yourself, and for me the gaps that are left intentionally or unintentionally are where I like to live. It's like I like to spend some time thinking about those threads that are left dangling intentionally or unintentionally. Like, not everything has to have people talk about character arcs, and by the end of the third book the character will have done this like full arc, and it's like, no, like, I don't really think how that's life is. I think by the time I get to 60, I don't think I'm going to have completed a full character arc necessarily. I think I would have progressed in some ways, I got better in some ways, I got worse in some ways, but it's not like a destination that I'm heading towards. It's more just kind of like things that occur within a certain time, and I think some fantasy authors do that really, really well, where some characters, you go in a certain direction then go in another, and it's really interesting. But anyway, that's all we got time for, mate. Unfortunately, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. It's been great hearing about your mentality and ethos with your hobby, and it's really refreshing and really invigorating and really interesting. So thank you for spending an hour with us. We really appreciate it, and I'd love to have you on the show again in the future. We can chat about something else.
Excellent, thanks, Dan. Yeah, it's been great. Really enjoyed it. It's got my brain whirring.
All right, well, take it easy, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks, Dan. See you.
So there you go, episode 248 all wrapped up there. I must apologise to Mark and also you guys for the noisy air conditioner that was going on in the background. You might have noticed it in that episode. That's the episode that I've noticed it the most. You might, if you are keen-eared, have noticed that in a few other recent episodes. That was because I have got the worst air conditioner in the world, and also it was quite hot when I was recording that latest batch of conversations, which isn't usually a problem, but when I was recording one podcast, I needed to turn the microphone up a little bit because the person I was talking to couldn't quite hear me, so I put the gain up quite a lot on the microphone and then forgot to turn it back down again, but I did notice it, I think, after Mark's episode. So apologies if that annoyed you during this show, but that's just the way it is sometimes. But I did notice it, and I have fixed that and rectified that, so you should stop hearing it over the next episode or so. But anyway, thanks a lot to Mark for coming on the show. Really nice guy. It's another one of the great reasons to be part of Paintalltheminis is you get to bump into people like Mark. Just a really nice stand-up guy, really interesting, really insightful, got a certain set of vision and set opinion on the hobby stuff, but doesn't use that as a stick to beat you with, not a gatekeeper in any way, shape or form. Quite the opposite, in fact. Is very accommodating, very open, and just interesting to hear his opinion on different stuff. So thanks, Mark. It's been great to get to know you. It's been great to chat to you, and hopefully we'll speak to you again in the future. Hobby stuff for me, nothing. Still on holiday, so literally no painting hobby stuff that's gone on here. Very little gaming stuff that's gone on. If you listen to previous shows, especially ones with Matthew, I'm still playing my Polish guy on online. We play Memoir 44. We must have played through, dude, I'd shudder to even think about how many scenarios are played in Memoir 44. 50. I'll count them up for the next show because I'm not the next post ramble because I'm not got any hobby stuff to talk about. So I'll count up how many scenarios of Memoir 44 that we've played together. And when we play those scenarios, we play them from both sides. So if I've played 50 scenarios, obviously played 100 plus games because we play them from both sides before we move on. So still not talking to him, still playing him, but he just doesn't respond to me ever whenever I send a message to him. I think there's 3 times now that I've sent a message to him and he doesn't respond. He's just the strong silent type. I'll try and figure out who's winning as well. Oh no, I won't actually, because I'm not actually bothered about who wins. But sometimes I win, sometimes he wins, and he must just enjoy it because, you know, whenever we finish a game, we start another one. But I'd be interested to know. I always think it would be like some sort of Jerry Springer thing. where like maybe in 10 years time, where we've played through all the scenarios in Memoir 44 like 5 times, it's like, I get to meet my long-term distance gaming partner. And we see each other for the first time. That'd be pretty cool. But if it goes to form, he probably would have no interest in that sort of thing. But anyway, I might track him down at some point in the future, go knock on his door and be like, hey, it's me. I'm the guy who's been playing Memoir 44 with you for all this time. But hopefully you've had a great hobby week. There's awesome pictures that have been in the Paintalltheminis Discord. There's been awesome pictures and work that's been in their Facebook. So thank you for all of that. If you're not a member of their Discord and you are a post-ramble rambler, make sure you use the link in the description for the podcast and come and swing by and come and say, hey, come and see how you do with our weekly quiz. Come and get involved in our monthly gaming league. Just about to start that, so there's still time to go and get involved. We're going to start playing Hive. I need to learn how to play because I think my first game is coming up next week with Mr. Scal, but I literally had 1 game of Hive, I think, with him. So I need to figure out learn how to play so I have some fun and so I'm a decent opponent, as I mentioned in the previous post Rumble. That's pretty much all it is for me. If you haven't answered the questions for the 250th episode, please do so. It'll really make that episode awesome. I've got a few surprise guests in there along with people that listen to the show. So if you've always wanted to be on a podcast, if you want to support us and share in the positivity that we try to build with all the Paintalltheminis stuff, then please record yourself, send it to paintalltheminis@gmail.com, and then we can see what we can put together. But that's enough of the post ramble. Until next time we're together, keep painting.